Hello there, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this seminar on patristics, especially on jubilation and glossolalia among the fathers and great figures within the church. It seems that jubilation, which is described as something very similar to praying and singing in tongues that we find in the modern day renewal movement, has very deep roots. That there's an excellent study that came out about a couple of years by John Poirier called The Tongues of Angels, the concept of angelic languages in classical Jewish and Christian texts. It traces jubilation to 2nd century BCE. Jewish and later Christian practice of singing in tongues of angels, the language of the angels, is called angel glossy, very much like glossolalia. And he asserts that both the jubilation tradition of the fathers and tongues, singing in tongues, praying in tongues, come from the concept of people praying in angelic languages in the early church and also in later Judaism. It seems that we find the first vivid descriptions of jubilation in the 4th century. And it continues for many centuries after that. In an article, jubilation was a yodeling sound, a call. Joseph A. Kamonchak asserts that this kind of wordless praise has deep roots. He says the verb jubilo and the noun jubilatio occur often in the Latin Psalms. Augustine would point out that the word referred to a vocal expression used to express a joy or happiness too immense or too deep for words. Kamonchak translates from Augustine's commentary on the Psalms. Here are Augustine's own words. What I am about to say to you, you already know. One who is whooping does not speak words. Whooping is a certain sound of joy without words. The sound of a mind poured forth in joy, expressing an affection as far as possible. The person bursts forth into a sound of exaltation without words. And this jubilatio, this jubilation, was central to the church. As part of my discovery, I read the early church fathers and mothers and the original lives of the saints. The description of thousands of people praying in jubilation and the genuinely felt emotion in their worship was far more rich, in a few instances at least, than what I had seen in modern charismatic masses and prayer groups. When people prayed this way, miracles, healing happened. This was also part of the chant and hymn song of the church. On the vowel A in Alleluia, there would be jubilations that were spontaneous and melodious. From the ending of the book of Acts until the 17th century, the literature of the church abounds with stories such as Augustine's. Those maintaining and continuing the patristic practice include figures, among the fathers and then among later figures in the church included Augustine, Ambrose, Teresa of Avila, among others. Nor is it limited to holy people like Teresa of Avila. Shocking new research shows whole congregations prayed this way for centuries. For the generation immediately after the apostles, we have original writings telling a story that is spiritually explosive, that can transfigure Christianity as surely as Christ was transfigured on the Mount of Transfiguration. Not only will it help root us in our heritage, it can lead us into a new and undreamed of future. One of the great things about the literature I've found on jubilation is the fact that you find many scenes that are vividly described, and they sound much like the renewal movement, conferences, masses, and gatherings today. And this is our history. Charismatic renewal, glossolalia, was not something that just came into the church in 1967. It has very deep roots, the deepest roots. Let's drop in on a Mass presided over by St. Augustine in the 4th century. He pastored a large parish in the town of Hippo in North Africa. In the 22nd chapter of his famous masterpiece, the city, not 22nd chapter, 22nd book of his famous masterpiece, The City of God. Augustine describes many of the miracles and healings he witnessed among ordinary people in his parish. As Augustine, let's move into one particular scene Augustine describes. There's so many quotes we could use, so many scenes from the Fathers we could look at. Among other things, read a diary of the diary of a pilgrimage, full of how early Christian worship was. As Augustine tells this particular story, crowds swarmed the Basilica of St. Stephen in Hippo. Two young people, a brother Paulus and Sister Palladia, suffered from a neurological disorder in which they trembled and were thrown into convulsions. Through a vivid dream, they felt a calling to go to the church in Hippo, where they were told they would be healed. At the start of the Mass, the young man Paulus prayed fervently for a cure. Unexpectedly, he fell prostrate, as Augustine put it, as though in a trance. His usual convulsions and tremblings ceased completely. Augustine, and these are his own words as he describes this scene, just as suddenly he arose, trembling had stopped. The whole church soon rang with the clamor of rejoicing. Nearly everyone broke into loud prayers of thanksgiving, Augustine says. People rushed up to where Augustine was sitting to tell him the whole story as the procession was about to begin. Paulus, accompanied by a crowd, stood in front of Augustine. Augustine raised him up to receive the kiss of peace. Augustine describes the rejoicing and jubilating crowd. Cries of joy rose up everywhere. No tongue was silent. The third day of Easter, Augustine had the brother and sister stand in front of the congregation. Someone read the account of the miracle that had happened to Paulus 3 days earlier. The contrast was clear. The young man stood still without trembling. Augustine dismissed the pair, while his sister was obviously still trembling and going into convulsions. They could see the difference in the two. He dismissed the pair while the congregation prayed fervently for the healing of Pelagia, the sister. Suddenly, new joyful sounds emerged from people in the area of the shrine railing. Pelagia had gone to the shrine in the basilica immediately after Augustine dismissed the two. She fell prostrate as though in a deep sleep and arose cured. The congregation, seeing this, broke out into loud, spontaneous praise of God. Augustine himself describes the jubilation. The exultation continued, and the wordless praise to God was shouted so loud that my ears could barely stand the din. But of course, the main point, Augustine says, was that in the hearts of this clamoring crowd, there burned that faith in Christ for which the martyr St. Stephen had shed his blood. Jubilation, according to the fathers, could be an ordinary form of prayer for believers in the Christian Roman Empire. It was a widespread form of individual prayer as well as communal prayer. Jerome mentions farmers in the field praying in this manner. Others mention Christian sailors and boatmen on the Loire praying in jubilation. It was so widespread that Marie Pirici, an historian of early Christian and medieval music, has said, this song prayer, modulated on all forms, became the refrain of gladness, which accompanied the daily occupations of the peaceful population converted to the new faith. Augustine describes the people in his church feeling free, not only for the awe and wonder and deep silences of prayer, but also for the rejoicing that can come with prayer and communal praise. The book, Augustine the Bishop, a monumental treatise by Van de Veer on Augustine's role as pastor of his parish. He summarizes Augustine. Men uttered their prayers out loud and much more often than they do today. They prayed straight from the heart and accompanied their prayers with lively gestures. Men prayed with sighs and tears. A man did not feel any sense of embarrassment when he stopped before the altar. in torn clothes and with disheveled hair, and broke out loud, or rather broke into loud sobs about his troubles. As the centuries went by, we still find jubilation alive and well 800 years later in the 13th century. Among the early Franciscans, though the seminar is on the fathers and patristics, we can see this patristic tradition continuing in the church. There are exquisite and beautiful scenes in the early Franciscan literature showing people praying individually and as groups in jubilation. I encourage you to read my book, Sounds of Wonder, and Mary Healing's book on healing is a place to read about how much healing and glossolalia were a part of our ancestors' faith. Thomas Celano, the first biographer of St. Francis and a friend of Francis, describes the scene of the canonization of St. Francis. It's reminiscent of the scene we saw from Augustine that we just looked at. And it's one of the most tender and beautiful scenes recorded in Christian history. And it involved jubilation. This is what Thomas Celano says in his own words. People danced in the streets. Then there was raised a clamor among many people praising God. The earth resounded with their mighty voices. The air was filled with their jubilations, and the ground was moistened with their tears. New songs were sung, much like praying and singing in the Spirit today. It seems I'll continue. And the servants of God jubilated in melody of the Spirit. Continuing in Celano's words, sweet sounding organs were heard there, and spiritual hymns were sung with well modulated voices. There was a very sweet odor breathed, and a most joyous melody that stirred the emotions resounded there. This shows us how central jubilation and in other literature, healing, expressive worship were a part of our heritage. Charismatic renewal today is not something wild and new, but has its roots in our very history. We've gone through an experiment, a 400-year experiment, without emphasizing healing and jubilation. And we're finding, as it returns, as it has so beautifully in the church in Brazil, wonders happening. One more father I want to quote for you. And there's so many quotes we could use. Let's turn to another father, St. Peter Chrysologus, and gives to me what I think is the most beautiful understanding of glossolalia, our tongues, as you would have it. In his writing, he pictures Jesus the shepherd that calls his sheep by means of the shepherd's yodel, the jubilation. Chrysologus breaks into poetry as he describes the call of the shepherd. The shepherd was sweet, jubilous, and varied melody, leads the flock to pasture, keeps the tired flock at rest under shady grove. The jubilous urges the flock to climb lofty mountains, there to graze on hopeful grasses. Also commands them to descend into low valleys, slowly and without hurry. How happy are those sheep that join their voices to the voice of the shepherd. That they follow when he calls to feed and gather. They truly jubilate to their shepherd. So he's saying, at least in his view, this jubilation tunes into an eternal sound, to an eternal sound that is the voice of the shepherd. And when we jubilate back, return his call, return his jubilation. We're entering into a mighty mystery. You see signs of spiritual quest everywhere. Within Christianity, Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox, I see the hunger for the recovery of a rich human and grounded spirituality. You can find Baptists learning contemplative prayer, and Catholics influenced by Pentecostalism, and Pentecostals appreciating the liturgy. The song, the sound we long to hear is a sound of wonder. We ache to see this earth, which we have commandeered and shrunk with our technology and industries, all afresh through a lens of amazement. In short, we want the everyday sights, sounds, and events of life to astonish us and to again dance to the ineffable music of God, who can saturate our lives, and even, if we will let him do it, change our culture. As we have seen so far, we are, as stated in the book of Hebrews, surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. First of all in Scripture, and then in the writings of our 2,000-year history as Christians. Part of what we want is a faith that is down to earth, human, approachable, yet at the same time, one that can listen in on the eternal music of a cosmos created and animated through Christ. When God touched people in our heritage, it affected their body, soul, and emotion. The whole of their being heard the eternal song and went through the crisis of transformation. One other scene, much later in the latter, Abbot Hyman of Pierre-sur-Dive, who was present at the building of the Cathedral of Chartres, describes people gathering together to pull stone, volunteers. He said, it's amazing. We have princes and beggars all pulling the heavy stone with hard labor to build this labor of those hearts. And at night, they would gather together thousands. And he says healings took place everywhere as people prayed in verbal, oral, and wordless prayer. Our ancestors in faith have much to offer us. But I encourage you to read my books, the two versions of Sounds of Wonder. The version that Pais Press in 1977, and the most recent edition by Tau Publishing are both out of print now. In Brazil, the Portuguese edition is still in print and can be purchased in Brazil. My new book that's just come out from Ave Maria Press, in a sense the publishing arm of Notre Dame University, has a chapter that summarizes all my recent research on jubilation. We have an amazing past. What we're doing in the charismatic renewal is not far out or weird, but it's at the core of our heritage. Let us learn to listen to the voices of our ancestors. Thank you and God bless.